Yes, now we are in live. So good evening, everyone. So we are together now with AWS UK Ambassadors, Phil, Dirk, John. So we all together attended to Raymond this year in Vegas. So we kind of found it's interesting to share our experience and to share our knowledge and get some interaction from you. Maybe you may have some questions regarding AWS Raymond. So here are 4 ambassadors. Each of us have different skill sets, and it's a good opportunity for you. So you may come up with some questions and come up with some comments. Feel free to post a comment on YouTube comment box, so we will see it. We will try to answer them promptly. So if you are waiting, any type of question, any type of comment is welcome. So first of all, I would like to give a couple of minutes to each of us to introduce themselves. So maybe we can begin with Phil to introduce yourself with a couple of sentences, please.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Phil Basford. I'm obviously one of the AWS Ambassadors. In my day job, I'm also CTO for ML and AI Inawisdom. So kind of my specialist track here was data analytics, machine learning, that kind of space. But I also cover a lot of the kind of the serverless and event architecture as well, because that's feeding to what we do. And outside of that, I run the Ipswich user group in the UK for AWS, and one or two other bits and bobs. So that's just a general background to who I am, what I do.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe one by one we make it.
Yeah, happy to go next. Yeah. Good evening and good morning and good day, everybody. So my name is Dirk Michel. I'm the SVP for Cloud and Digital here at Micom OSI. Seemingly, I've been in the cloud space since forever. I have a telecom focus. We are an ISV partner in the APN network, and my particular lens, I would say, or my background on this is really container services, EKS, ECS, and anything that touches containers is going to be my particular wheelhouse. I cut across some other areas as well, evidently, right? Flexible compute, some other services in that space, and hybrid and networking as well. So yeah, super to be here and to share some experiences on reInvent.
Hi there, everyone. So my name is John Walker. I'm the head of architecture at Cirrus HQ. So we're a consulting partner working purely on AWS. I also the co-runner of the AWS user group for Edinburgh, and I'm coming for the one in Glasgow as well. And I'm also in the community builder program. So in terms of my background, I come from a development background. And at Cirrus, we are doing a lot of migration work and focusing a lot on the sort of education space as well. And a lot of what I was looking through at reInvent is a lot in the cloud operation side of things and some of the serverless and DevOps, essentially, for basically using things on AWS, probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, thank you, John. And it's Dorian. I am one of the founder of this community. Together with a group of people, we are trying to expand our knowledge in DevOps domain. I'm working for a company called Kloia as cloud consultant. We are also a partner of AWS. So I'm working mostly in application modernization domain. If you have any questions regarding app modernization, not mobile app in general, I mean, modernizing legacy apps into a new way of, let's say, doing things. So it's me. You can address to me. So welcome again. Obviously, there has been so many announcements, and not all of them are in keynotes. Also in some breakout sessions, there was also some tiny new features which has been announced. Obviously, we will not have time to go one by one, but I may ask maybe what was the major announcements you think it's worth to mention here in your own domain. Obviously, each of us has different, as I mentioned, technical or daily working routines. Maybe one by one, if you would like to mention about what was your favorite, what was the major ones that you find interesting.
Yeah, I mean, happy to go first.
Please.
We can probably do a round robin as well. I mean, it's there's been so much, right? As you were saying, Dorian, right? I mean, there's been genuinely so much going on. It's been a very, very exciting 2022. One of the big announcements for me with my, if you like, Kubernetes or container hat on, were 2 or 3 or possibly 4. I mean, we can typically put them into 2 buckets, right? One are announcements that are really generally available announcements, right? Things that are available now, launched at reInvent, that you can start using the day after, effectively. And then there are a bunch of other announcements, the second category of announcements, which might more be forward-looking announcements or things that are available in preview. So you would sign up and you would then be able to experience perhaps a preview version, a beta version that's not yet generally available. And then there is, the associated bucket, which is really like a coming soon bucket, right? So it's not available yet for you to see. You can't yet quite sign up to a preview, but it's coming soon, right? So those will be the buckets. And in the bucket of generally available, what was a light bulb moment for me, and honestly, I did not see this one coming, curiously enough, was around the marketplace for containers, right? So anyone who's in that space and who leverages all kinds of different microservices and containers and Helm charts and other objects and artifacts from suppliers to build out and operationalize your workloads on Kubernetes, for example. We have a long-standing history of going to all manner of lengths and places to obtain the software that we need and operationalize our clusters. Around add-ons, for example, and things like that. And then further integrate them, obviously, into the wider ecosystem of AWS services. But the prospect now, or it's generally available, right? The possibility now to be able to leverage the console or CDK or the CLI to really activate and deploy add-ons from a quote-unquote containers marketplace is to my eye anyway, a huge potential game changer, right? As it changes the experience so dramatically, right? From needing to go away and scraping together what you need to a perhaps more streamlined consumption model, which makes you much more productive and more effective, right? And you spend less time doing other things to assemble what you need. It's still quite young, evidently it's totally new, right? The available number of add-ons are not quite large yet, but it'll grow over time. But just opening this up and creating a little bit of a marketplace, which is a very, very powerful engine, right? To open this up to containers and add-ons in particular, really has a big game-changing potential to my eye. So that was a huge one. I've got some other ones I guess we can touch on, but that would be one to call out from my side.
By the way, if any of you have any announcements, I'm now asking the audience, please comment on YouTube, comment box, so that may be something we may have experienced, or we may comment also. Please try to ask us also if you please.
I mean, now that you say that, I mean, I'll just probably fire them out so then people can react to them, or maybe we cycle back if you wanted to. A big thing for me was also as part of the leadership container sessions, right? Things like Carpenter being called out. So it's a novel way of doing node autoscaling. So that's a huge topic, super interesting, very exciting. The open source investment that AWS and the community are doing are very significant. Finch is a new open source container development CLI that's been launched and that's available. That's super exciting in that space. And then two, I mean, bombshells, you might call them, right? But VPC Lattice is a huge addition. I mean, it's a coming soon preview type situation here, but that was, a jaw-dropping announcement. it should have deserved, I think, much more visibility. But VPC Lattice is in addition, broadly speaking, to the service mesh space and many other things, but it plays in that area. So we could talk about that. That was a huge announcement. And on the security side of the house, with regards to guard duty being extended further, not only to be able to process audit logs from Kubernetes and things like that, but guard duty being extended into container runtime security is, hearing, I believe it was Adam, if I'm not mistaken. I think Adam briefly touched on it. It's another big area, I think, where AWS native options are going to be felt and are going to become more visible in the cloud native space. So yeah, that would be my quick selection of major highlights from my lens.
Thank you, Dirk. So anyone maybe have any other comments? Yeah, John.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that, just on guard duty as well. The feature they've released for guard duty for RDS looks really good. So actually protecting for sign-ins to the database and malicious queries, etc., being run into RDS looks as if it could be really good, because guard duty for EC2 is one of those services that you just turn on. There's no real drawback to having it on, and the benefits you get from it are always really good. So being able to have that in containers, as you say, and also in RDS, I think is really good. And similar to that, they also released Amazon Inspector for Lambda to do sort of deep dives into the actual Lambda code and look for malicious packages and anything actually in Lambda itself, which at the moment you can do, but you usually have to do it as part of the pipeline. You may have a package that runs on your GitHub, for example, that can do a lot of that for you. But as you're having, as you say, a native service that can do that as part of the deployment is something that's really good. But yeah, it just beyond that, there was quite a number of announcements that I saw that look to me as if they have a lot of potential. They, at the moment, they're kind of limited, but what's there is quite good. So a couple of examples of that. One is Code Catalyst, being able to have multiple different workloads and just load them straight up into your editor. It actually works really well. Just clicking through and having your workload in that particular project just load directly into VS Code or Eclipse, etc. It can really speed up development time. At the moment, I think there are some restrictions on it in terms of if you've got multiple accounts, especially for different customers, which is probably something that affects myself as a partner more than it does actually individual users of AWS. But the service itself looks quite useful. And the other one is the application composer. So I've used that a bit just now of actually being able to spin up serverless applications, but probably it's realistically going to be used for microservices within a few minutes, and having it be able to take the different components of serverless and just generate a AWS SAM template for you that you can then deploy, which is all saved locally to your machine. I found that process is really powerful. At the moment, there's a lot of the sort of default things you might want there. So you can create an API gateway that links to DynamoDB, for example, and then you can link that to Lambda. But there are some services that don't quite link together yet. So that's what I'm saying. There's very much a potential there for that to develop in the future and have many more services in it. And I can see a point where when you're designing something that's serverless, rather than having to, if you're using CloudFormation, actually go and create all the CloudFormation manually, just using the application composer to be able to do that. One of the great things about it is it's a drag and drop interface, and you link the different components together with essential pipes. And one of the examples I was using was had a Lambda function and an S3 bucket, and you want to give the S3 bucket, you want to give the Lambda function, access to the bucket, and just by linking those two together, it automatically creates all the permissions that are required for the Lambda function to access the bucket, and only that bucket. So the way it's able to actually create the SAM template in the background in a best practice way, I think is something that's going to be really powerful once people start actually using it. So, because a lot of those things they're very easy to miss the small individual steps that you need to do, and having something like Application Composer do it for you is going to be really powerful.
Yeah, Phil, maybe on your side.
Yeah, so being in the analytics space and everything else, that's the lucky thing is I have basically two great big keynotes to pick from, and it's mostly the entire content of both Adam's and the ML one the next day. So there is a bucket load, and it does come into that preview versus general availability category. So a lot of this is going to be, they announce is cool stuff, but some of it is preview only. So maybe I'll start with the analytics bit and then divulge a little bit into the ML bit, and then I have a couple of sneak twists as well. So where to start? So Spark Everywhere was kind of what they were doing. So they got if you wanted to run PySpark and do big stuff for that, the options you had previously that were AWS centric options was either the power up in EMR cluster or go and run it in Glue. Obviously, all of that's a bit cumbersome when you just want to write some pure PySpark. So what they've done is integrated that with both Athena and also Redshift, so you can run it across your data lake and your data warehouse and run it directly. So it's a little bit more like Databricks, and they're offering in that space as a kind of a like for like. So that's really cool. Linked to that, they come up with this thing called no ETL, and you can debate how far that will go. And we only really started on the E at this re:Invent, so obviously, the T and the L was probably coming later. But basically, that was about removing quote unquote the muck from taking something from a transactional database into a reporting analytics data warehouse kind of thing. So they're focused obviously double down on the AWS technologies in that stack. So at the moment it's Aurora RDS, which is obviously their pure database engine. I'm not sure if it's limited to just Postgres or MySQL, but it's definitely Aurora RDS, and basically when you write transactions into that, it will automatically appear in a Redshift cluster for you then to do your analytics on as a raw data entry point really inside that. So that's kind of cool. That'll help out. The big ones, however, are two kind of things. Was data and a data zone. I have to get this quite right because there's which is a kind of governance, central access, discovery platform for your data, wherever it's located. So it may be located in Redshift, Athena, maybe some operational database, whatever. Provides central access and governance and a meta store over that. It's in preview, and the preview is very early. We don't expect to see it until late next year, really, to even get anywhere near GA. So, that's at early stage. The other kind of one is data. It's just back on that. If anybody in the open source community is paid with Data Hub, it's very much like Data Hub, but their take on it, basically, it's the same kind of technology space. Clean rooms is the other kind of big one in the data space. So I've been discussing it endlessly all day, actually. So a lot of organizations obviously produce their internal data warehouse, and that obviously powers their own intelligence and their analytics, and that's great. But there's certain situations where maybe you want to share data out to the community to either provide some transparency for regulation or auditing, or just to off it back to open source. Like I think they gave an example somewhere, I think of like Heineken or something, their manufacturing and beer brewing process, they basically make all of the data from that available because it's not part of their actual business. So they just make it available for wider consumption. So it's about being able to make data available, but in that process, make sure that you remove any sensitive information. And it's about doing that in a way that doesn't require too much overhead on the engineer to clean that data before putting it into the clean room so that somebody else can share it. And the idea is that you can bring probably two or three different parties to create one collaborative clean room that's like covers a certain domain. So maybe a bit more on healthcare or ESG or something like that, where that's incredibly useful. There's the mandatory updates to quick sites, so they got they can ask why questions to quick site queue, so they've improved the ML there, pagination on that kind of thing, and that was mostly it. That's quite enough, to be honest. For the analytics space. In the ML space, it was a little bit more sparse this year if you compared it to previous years. So there was a ML governance for SageMaker. I haven't explored that just yet and how that relates to things like feature store and model registry that's previously reinvents and how this all integrates with a new studio interface, but that allegedly provides you more control over that. The main announcements, however, is geospatial. I've done a lot in this space, and it's very hard to write models in this space. I've literally got code that's 1,000 lines long of keras layers of how you project coordinates from a 2D plane to a 3D plane and the distance between them using something like great circle distance, that kind of thing. Basically, they have released some inbuilt algos for you to be able to do that, and you can also visualize that in SageMaker. And the other three things that crept out actually on the whole ML space silently, but are equally important for my role, is SageMaker endpoints now have what's called shadow testing. So if you had two models previously, you'd have to A/B test them, but that would take traffic to both models and split the traffic. So model A wouldn't get the traffic to model B, and model B wouldn't get it. So which is a bit rubbish when you're comparing exact models, because you want to compare the prediction made by both models. Shadow allows you to run both similar. So you have a prime and a secondary where you're recording results on. That's kind of cool. There's been some cool like feature updates to comprehend and Textract. So on Textract, it's underneath, it's heavily trained on invoice data, so it's very invoice centric. So basically, they've also now trained it on a lot of mortgage data. So a lot of mortgage data is available with specific entry points to get into that. And on comprehend, you can do straight. You don't have to take it via Textract now for extraction from PDFs. You can go straight into comprehend. So that's all cool. The best, however, announcement, and the one I've played most with, is not in any of that space, but helps me tremendously, is distributed maps for step functions. That was in the serverless space that came out, and I've played for that for the last 2 or 3 days. And basically, for those who don't know, if you're trying to do lots of parallel jobs inside step functions, there were some arbitrary limits around. You can only pass, I think it was 100 into a map iterator, and so many concurrencies. So you'd have to build up maps that daisy trained them and stuff like that to handle like high compute loads. This removes all of that complexity, and basically you can send 1,000 things to whatever service you want, and it will manage it for you. I've managed to be able to send stuff to both to ECS to run ECS jobs and also batch to run containers as well, and it all worked very nice. There's a couple of gotchas around that. One is CDK integration. Well, so they've changed the map operator completely, basically. They've made it backwards compatible and deprecated some of the old stuff, but they're completely reimagined, if in step functions, how that's done. So things like iterate itself is deprecated, but there's a new way of doing it. So watch that compatibility, but it is backwards compatible. And the reason why I know it's backwards compatible is because the CDK doesn't have kind of ability to do any of this yet. So I wrote it all up in the CDK and then had to mod it inside the studio, but it all worked nice in the end. The other gotcha is that you can also have sub batches to other functions. If you're doing that, then you still have to put this rate in the other one or cope with an array input into your other ones, but that may be what you intend. So you could say send 1,000, have 1,000, split it into hundreds things, and then maybe that 100 things is passed straight into the Lambda, whatever your downstream service is. So that's broadly all the things I gleaned and I learned, and they were all pretty cool, but the step function one was the coolest one in my area. But VPC Lattice does come close, and we can have a good chat about what that is. I think that's it. I think that's a massive game changer.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Maybe we can input links to the chat window. I'm doing now the one Dirk has mentioned, which is like marketplace for containers. So if you come up with the links that the announcements that you mentioned to input to the chat, we can do it together. And Phil, maybe would you like to mention about you had a couple of interviews, right, during Rainmat? Because Rainmat is not just breakout sessions for ambassadors like us. There's also an opportunity for interviews, live streams. Maybe you may mention about this.
I did 2 or 3 things, and we some of us shared one of the cool things I've done, and we can all talk about that in a minute. So I did. What did I do? We did some because we're all part of the partner network. We did some roundtables on the Monday and Tuesday. That was all cool, but quite boring, and went entertaining the audience with it. What we did was quite cool on the Wednesday and the Thursday is I filmed some videos in Vegas, some AWS videos I hasten to add. One was a my architecture video. So I obviously previously just mentioned Extract and Comprehend to me of my take on AWS reInvent. They're quite important. We do a lot of what we call IDP work, which is about processing documents, that kind of thing. We've done quite a few pieces of work for some clients that use those technologies and built some architectures. So I had the pleasure of doing a my architecture video shoot at Vegas, which should come out sometime in the new year. So I did that on the Wednesday. And the Thursday, I did also. So the my architecture format is like when you're videoing one-to-one, you're talking one-to-one to an AWS architect, and it's a very close experience. On the Thursday, I had another film that I produced, but this is very different, where it's like they made it up like a proper studio with lighting, fake backdrop, expensive cameras, that I was being directly interviewed into the camera, which is a bit more disconcerting, with these cameras pointing at me and this person behind the camera directing me and asking me questions. But so I filmed that for on the Thursday, and that was also just all really cool experience. The other cool thing I've done, and I know that some of you guys did it, was we went and ran the 5K. What a great idea that was.
Very cool.
Completely jet lagged and knackered and everything, and I decided to haul my ass out of bed at 5 a.m. or something to get down to the Mandalay
Which
Bay.
was really surprising, Phil, right? Because we were both doing it, and I think maybe others as well, right? And there were so many of the runners. I couldn't find you, Phil. I was actively seeking you out, trying to find you. And I just could not find you. That was a very cool thing to do, And the ambassador roundtables are just also very valuable, right? To really provide feedback on various topics. And I know that you did, Phil and John and others. But to really have the ambassador community actively helping to steer some of these programs, be it certification, training and certification, be it some of the APN programs that are possibly well known. Migration acceleration, workload migration, some other topics perhaps that you can also speak to, Dorian, and up modernization, I believe. In fact, I'm not quite sure if there is something relating to that.
It was like
right?
still yes, but it is under Microsoft workloads competency. So as you can imagine, it's mostly related with .NET, but app modernization is a wider scope, as you can imagine. So yes, there is one competency. Let's say program under competency, but it's a wider wider competence. Maybe there will be an upcoming such competence in the future. We will see.
Yeah, and you just reminded me, right? Because obviously we haven't really spoken about the announcements yet in the partner space. I think that was a key takeaway for many of us, right? That there was a really, I mean, it's been a mainstay for a long time, but like a reaffirmation, just, you know, an energetic push and reminder for everyone on the importance of the APN partner network, right? And all the companies that surround AWS, if you like, that make stuff happen, that help migrate, you know, that help the adoption, you know, just like you just said, Phil, right? Or you, John, on some of the studio things, to really help the adoption and provide the business cases for people to go to the cloud and digitize and transform, right? And the keynote on partners, I think, was really full of confirmations and adjustments, in part to the feedback that we are providing from the ambassador community.
And as you said, it's more like a social networking activity from my point of view. It's more like, yes, you have a lot like socializing, networking, meeting with new people or your counterpartners or your friends and acquaintances in that activity. Yes, please, John.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that. Just being able to actually meet the people at AWS that, like, for example, in the partner network, the teams are actually coming up with these programs and actually talking to them about the process they're going through, and just being able to meet these people in person and networking in general. Like, as I mentioned, I'm part of the community builders network as well. And I know, Phil, you're there as well at the meal that night. We had the big community builders meetup and actually got to meet all the different people who maybe spoken to in the Slack channel that we've got, but actually been able to go to Vegas and meet all the different people from all the various ways that you interact with AWS was a key highlight for me, because a lot of the information you can get afterwards, but actually being able to talk to peers and people from AWS was excellent. Sorry, I'm going to...
Yeah.
No, that's completely agree. Maybe I can talk a little bit about more than what I did on the Monday, actually, because I think that might be interesting to the general audience, and I can't go into too much detail, but I can give you a flavour of it. So I was volunteered, selected. I don't know how I ended up, but I was in a room, doing a panel session, and it was with the training and certification leaders of AWS, which is quite nice. And the reason I got invited was obviously the partner aspect, but also having multiple certs, nearly all bar one, etc. So they were interviewing people in that area, and it was quite cool. We went into where they're going, what their kind of strategy is going forth, and how they're going to go about stuff. But also they were going quite, and this is where it might have quite resonance with people. We had the product ownership of the skill builder platform in the room, and what they're doing with that, and how they're gamifying it, and there's a lot more to it than I just thought it was just a rebadge of the old training content and all that stuff that they put out, but they're putting a lot into like the gamification of it, and it's got a VR virtual reality aspect where you can wander around and part of guilds and earn knowledge and stuff, and they're putting a lot into, and putting a lot of investment into Skill Builder to make it a good platform to learn from, and it's kind of where they're bringing together all the previous strands. So that's really, really, really cool. And it's probably something that we'll probably use a bit more at my place going forth. I don't know what your general views on Skill Builder is, but it's kind of interesting that they're building that out.
I find that super interesting. Good that you mentioned it, Phil, because I mean, one of the things that we as ambassadors do, apart from being certified all the way to our teeth, as you were saying, right? I think the density of certifications that we hold is second to none. But being an ambassador, as although we are, it also means that we are advocating for it. We are helping people getting certified, and Skill Builder that you're calling out is is sometimes perhaps under leveraged, underutilized. Perhaps the visibility of it is not always there. And we've started now at our place, as it happens, incidentally, to leverage it more. So I'm quite excited to see what's going to happen now. As you said, Phil, right? There seems to be a push coming along, an investment into Skill Builder, as it's sometimes a little bit sparse as to what it contains, in particular when you're really trying to prepare and you're trying to help others to prepare for certifications that can be quite challenging, right? It could really help, right? Because otherwise you have a little bit of an experience where you try to go to 2, 3, 4 different platforms to obtain learning material. And that's great to have options. But I think sometimes it feels that there is a big potential still inside of Skill Builder and associated things, where training and certification can provide more supplementary learning opportunities, right? Because people will have accounts, they can log in, they can self-pace many of the things, and it's just a great environment, right? And of course, it's quote unquote vended through AWS.
Yeah, one of the feedback I gave them was, and this is standard kind of practice, I think, but is like they obviously have all this, you have all the event sessions. So I'm like, when anybody in my team wants to do a certification, I'm like, well, go and watch. If you're doing SA Pro, go and watch all the general 400, 300 space things, because I find that like an incredible resource. I'm like, well, why don't you integrate that into your learning paths and supplement that and other bits and pieces? So they need to build a strand together. John, did you do the service one last night?
No, I keep seeing people getting the badge, and I'm very quickly, because one of the AWS heroes, Luke Van Tonkers, I think it is, he tweeted about last night and said that the level of the questions is actually close to the speciality level, which I didn't expect at all. But just sorry, you guys say something there for?
No, I agree. I did take it last night and I actually failed it by about 0.1% or something bizarre. And it was on some SAM pipeline stuff probably that I failed on, which is not acceptable. I'm going to have to sort that out. But anyway, it was quite hard. Yeah, it was. There was easy stuff. Really obvious stuff like you'd expect at associate level, but there was really complex stuff as well. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, it's not like some of the other training courses where it's here's all the information and there's an exam at the end, but it does seem like it's much more actually looking at your knowledge. But one of the things I do like about what Skill Builder has done in terms of when you're preparing for the certifications is that they've moved the practice exams out of the training portal and into Skill Builder. So where previously when you were doing trying to do the exam prep and I had to do a practice exam, you would pay, it was $20 you would pay, but now that's free in Skill Builder. So it's a small thing, but if you're trying to do multiple exams, those add up. So just having that wee extra thing in Skills Builder is quite good. But one thing I think they could do slightly better in Skills Builder is more on a sort of learning path, because there's a lot of good content there, but it seems disconnected a lot of the time. And trying to find the things that you should look at next or a specific area can sometimes be a bit challenging with the search on it. So actually having like a full learning path for people of like, I want to go into DevOps or I want to learn about serverless, and saying, well, here's all the things that you can learn and here's where we recommend you go next, I think could be really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because, we'll probably switch topic in a second, but the exam prep guides, right? These PDF 2-pagers, right, that are being published that are like super useful. I mean, and sometimes they're just like 3 pages full. I mean, just long lists of things, and you think, wow, right, I have to learn all of this. To integrate this as a curating element into the content, right? That, to your point, right, John, that it becomes a little bit more accessible as to when you're prepping for a particular exam, you still have to go and look at a fractured landscape of content on Skill Builder to maybe draw this together in a path. I think that's kind of what you mean, right? That'll be super helpful. And if you integrate what you were saying, Phil, with the reInvent videos, which are an invaluable resource to get prepped up. To get those integrated, that's going to make Skill Builder such a more interesting place to go.
Yeah, by the way, not everyone may be aware of Skill Builder. I'm also posting the link of it. I hope it's the correct one, because such type of effort or such type of online content, there are a lot, but not everyone is aware of such content. So you don't have to invest on this as just your time. I mean, and you have your time. If you invest on your time, there are a lot of online content to build your skills. Maybe I may comment a bit from my side on AWS application modernization side. Of course, Composer is something, any preview service, interesting, where you build your distributed architecture using serverless and other resources on AWS. It kind of reminded me the tool called Camunda, because on Camunda also it's if you're aware of Camunda, it's also a AWS technology partner, where you define your architecture like in a flow way of your distributed functions or microservices or domain services. How doesn't matter. Composer also kind of lets have some similarity between with Camunda. So what AWS do is, from what I see, injects those functions, like you said, scanning inside Lambda or containers, like coming up with new features and challenging the players in the ecosystem, because sometimes it intersects, right? Those vendors in the ecosystem, AWS ecosystem, may have also similar features or same features. AWS also comes with a similar feature. I think it's challenges, or kind of it's up to AWS customers which one you to go with. And also in application modernization space, there is also a tool which was announced last year called Microservice Extractor. It's kind of interesting tool where this tool can parse your .NET code and can split a portion of it as a separate microservice automatically. Obviously, last year it was not mature, but I attended the workshop this year. It was quite impressive to see how it can split the functions in a complex monolith. And also a workshop which I attended was from the time of COBOL mainframes. It was interesting. I never code COBOL, so it's first time I saw a code COBOL. So it's a company called Blue H, which AWS acquired last year during pandemic, and they are capable of to convert your COBOL to Java. Obviously, it's still a monolith, or it's still not a modern style or modular monolith, of course, but it's a way forward to modernize if you have any COBOL by chance in your entity or in your customers. That was impressive. I mean, it worked. I did the workshop from the beginning to end. They have I will also post the page of Blue H into the comments, just in case. I hope you don't have any COBOL, but just in case you have any COBOL in your company, in your teams, you may consider this service. It's it's a department now, not a separate company. It's now an AWS department. Obviously, the keynote of Werner was began with asynchronous versus synchrony, right? Asynchrony versus synchrony. I think it's also opens the gate to audience to modernize further their applications, to benefit from the services like Event Bridge, the service like Lambda, or any distributed service that helps your domain, I mean business domain, to be distributed and to benefit from all these functions. I think that's why Werner get into that much to asynchrony, because as the reality in the industry, still 90%, it's said that 90% plus of the applications still are working as synchronous, like an old style, like a legacy style. Even they are not COBOL, even they are like Java or .NET. Still, there is a majority in the industry which depends on the way they call asset versus base. If you heard about asset vs base model, still many of them works at like transactional way. That was my favorite topics. And first time in Raymond, there was a topic. If I didn't miss from the last Raymond, but first time there was a workshop regarding event storming. Also, that was another topic. It's also related with domain-driven design and software. So, which means that this Raymond, from my experience, it had deep dive topics regarding software modernization and software architecture. Because event storming was in the industry for a long time, but at first time this Raymond it has been as a topic in a workshop. Those are my experiences as a summary.
Yeah, there's a one that I went to that was kind of related to that on application integration patterns. And that was actually really good. It was originally focused on microservices, but applicable to sort of all applications. And it kind of discussed about different ways of integrating parts of your application or your application with other applications, and talked about things like loose coupling and making sure that different parts don't affect each other, but all of the actual different sort of ways that you can integrate patterns and so that you can scale up different parts of it in different ways. So having each section of your application not affect the other, so that if one part goes down, it doesn't affect anything else. But it's probably, I think that one's actually on YouTube, and there's quite a lot of different patterns in there. I think there was a book they mentioned, Enterprise Integration Patterns, that looked quite interesting to let's see different ways that you can do that sort of messaging between applications or between different parts of your application. That was quite an interesting one.
Yeah, on that and the asynchronous thing, obviously the two big kind of announcements in that space are beyond the step function one, obviously, was the event bridge pipes, which I think they completely missold in the keynote, actually, because I didn't really understand it until after the keynote, because I thought you still had to send everything via an event bridge, but you don't. Event bridge bus, you don't. You can just glue things like DynamoDB streams to Kinesis or whatever, or you can do MQ to step functions, whatever, without writing or complex lambdas in the way to massage things between the different formats. So I think that's quite a nice way of joining services together, a lot more easier than before. And then the other one was event scheduler, and again, I don't really understand the difference between event scheduler and the existing kind of cron option that you have. I think
so I was just going to say, I think the difference between the two is basically scale. I think
exactly.
Very similar to step functions and the distributed map. The event scheduler can handle millions of requests.
Exactly that. So instead of it's like one process that happens, we're like, okay, you may have 1,000 things and they all need to run in half an hour or whatever, and you just pile them up and it will sort it out for you. And that is cool. You're completely right there, John. And when I dug into it, that was the main thing, was the scale, the fact that it's less a orchestration device for some big process, more that it can be used right in the middle of an application to schedule stuff like you would do like back in the day when I was writing Java, like threads and stuff going off all that inbuilt scheduling and that kind of thing. It's the kind of equivalent. That's really quite cool, actually.
Yeah, I think that's one of the examples I've seen on that was they were talking about you can even use it for things that are scheduled within your application. So like if you've got a booking that you've done, for example, and you need to send the customer an email in a week's time, just throw it into schedule and the scheduler will do all that for you. So you're actually using it as part of your application, which I thought was really good. The event bridge pipes actually is one of the ones that, like I was saying earlier, it's one that looks really good just now, but I can see the potential of it a lot more in the future. Because there's a lot of, the amount of sources that you've got of things that you can take things out of is slightly limited just now. So it is things like you mentioned, like streams and Kinesis and SQS, etc. but the outputs seem to have a lot more at the moment. So you can go to Lambda, you can even go to CloudWatch logs as well after that. But I can see that being expanded a lot more in the future to have more places that you can do inputs and using Event Bridge pipes as the glue between everything rather than Lambda as it is at the moment. So I think that's one I'm really excited to see where they go with that.
Yeah, I tried to catch up with the links. I hope those are the correct ones. I'm trying to post it meanwhile, because obviously not everyone may be aware of those, but I hope those are the correct ones. Okay.
I'm just posting them in the private chat. You're translating them across, right?
Yeah, sure. Dark is helping me in the background. So obviously, as these are, there is also a cheat sheet, I guess, right, for the arraignment. I may also post it on the chat. There are several other topics which was announced. Like for instance, my Java developer friends also, they were excited regarding with the new Lambda fast speed up function. Yeah, that was one of the maybe downside of Java. Although Java has a big major community, because of this spin up time, let's say, or cold start, or how do you call it? Even without cold start, it doesn't depend on cold start. But AWS, I haven't tried yet. I'm curious about how it works. But
the Lambda
that's
snap,
interesting.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Lambda snap, exactly. Snap start or snap? Yeah,
snap start. Yeah,
snap start. Yeah, yeah, that was the one. Also interesting from the Java community for sure.
Yeah, because it's specifically aimed at a problem that's Lambda's very bad at. So if you got this is going way back into my naughty past being a Java developer for many a year, is that like 10 years ago, whatever, everybody was adopting the Spring framework, and basically that was a great framework in Java because it allowed you to disconnect all your code and do everything for your configuration, and it was a good kind of pattern. But what it inevitably lent to is a big startup time where it was just mapping all your code and bringing it all together and discovering all the different aspects and wiring all the different components together, which would mean that, yeah, Java app would start up was quite intensive. You do that in a Lambda, it's still a heavy start time, and it's not a shared start time. And I haven't looked at the startup and exactly what that does, but that was the key problem. Is like most Java people would go down the Spring route to implement their apps these days, and it's still relatively well to the path. But it means that in that kind of environment, it just doesn't behave well, and it's not. It would never dream to work well. So it'll be. I'll probably have a look at that at some point. These days, well, it's Python and Node for me, but yeah, that's the historic thing about using Java inside Lambda. It doesn't play nice if you're using something like Spring.
Yeah, maybe last question from my side, if you don't mind. Next, Raymond, do you have anything in your mind, any type of AWS service function, or anything related with AWS? Would you be willing, or would you be willing to see during next Raymond, or you were expecting this Raymond maybe as an announcement, or I don't know, any ideas you have maybe in mind?
Yeah, maybe first. I've been quite vocal about this in various communities already. So if you're in the machine learning world on AWS, there is only, and obviously it could be deliberate, or it's obviously a USP. So maybe that's still their strategy, frankly. But it's SageMaker and only SageMaker, and everything else you have to buy your own kind of way of rolling it out. There's not really a nice alternative for your sites. It's just like, yeah, SageMaker or roll your own. I think they could. There's some vendor options on that, but I think they could invest a bit more time in things like ML Flow and stuff like that, and have a managed service offering for some of those ML things, like they do for like Airflow, etc. You know, you got Airflow versus step function. So I would like a more middle of the stream, because I see a lot of people wanting the middle of the road and not going all the way to SageMaker because of complete lock-in and all that kind of thing. So I think they need to look a bit more about best of breed, open source ML frameworks and technologies, and make a more managed service approach to to those. That's my big wish, really.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, given that it's very, I mean, it's the season, right? Talking about wish lists and Christmas coming around and all these things. I mean, there are probably two or three items, but one thing that one would really hope a little bit of supplementary investment would go into things like CDK. I mean, it always feels like something. It is being advertised. We are strong adopters of it for some time, and availability and updates inside of CDK, and perhaps making it also a little bit more accessible with workshops and other things during re:Invent. That would be an interesting thing to consider. I mean, clearly there are many alternatives, and you've got your Terraforms and the Pulumis, and everything is really great stuff. But as an AWS native option with CDK. It sometimes makes you think as to why isn't it receiving more attention, right? Because it is, I mean, the constructs and the construct libraries that are available for it being updated, but then really some critical ones, be it in the container space, in the EKS space. I mean, it really bears a lot of potential to improve that experience for us, right? For the builders and developers. The other thing I would put on my wish list are, some of the services are, I mean, they're constantly being renewed and fresh entrants are coming in. But if you take, for example, just something like chaos engineering, right, and you take the fault injection simulator and different thing like that, or anything that really relates to proving out or attempting and helping to prove out resilience and helping to prove out, well-architected patterns, but really quantifying them and being able to validate these types of architectures against a specific criteria. And FIS is one of the players in that space that might help you do that. But having like a little bit of a studio experience for some of those services is going to be, or would really be, a great thing, right? To help the adoption and everyone else. As these services, they do mature over time. So really catering towards the builder to be more productive and to be faster. Not saying low code, because for me it's not about low code. For me it's just about developer productivity, right? And if I can design things faster with a bit of a visual aid, especially when it comes to parallelisms and forks and different things like that, where you want to just quickly see as to how you're putting this together, that will be a big benefit for many services, I think. So that'll be my view.
Yes, I think one good example of where they have done that is the step function designer.
Yes.
There's areas where it could be slightly better, but being able to actually see the flow of your step functions is really useful, rather than it does still generate the template and you've got the template to look at, but try to read that through a template and visualize how all that fits together could be a nightmare. But the visual designer for that is really nice. And sort of so some of the things I would quite like, and kind of going back to your point, Doug, there about the sort of well architected and the best practices, is because the amount of AWS services that are there is so large, and there's so many different ways of configuring things. People get lost in how to do things the right way. So obviously, as partners, that's kind of where we come in and we help people to get to the right place. But even with us, if there's a new service, trying to figure out, like, okay, what do we need to do here? Where are the gotchas? What do we need to look out for? Can be a bit of a nightmare. So something that can like show you where the gaps are between where you are and well architected and what the actual state of an account is would be quite good. But also on the IAM side of things and the permission sets, obviously because of the way that Amazon have kind of built up the IAM and with all the roles and permissions, the stuff that they've done, they had to kind of invent in the first place. So I think one of the talks that we had in the ambassadors, they did say that if they were designing it from scratch today, they would design it completely differently. But they've got all this stuff that's built up over time, and they basically have to support that, but everyone's used to kind of it working that way. But it's very easy right now to accidentally give too wide permissions or to do completely the wrong thing, or not even that, just when you do have it set up the right way and you want to give a new user a set of permissions or roles, it can be very easy to inadvertently give them more permissions than they really should have. So I think they are concentrating on that side of things. And one of the things I think they're going to be doing is with Control Tower, the improvements that they're making to that. So things like Security Hub now being integrated into the Control Tower that is announced. I think the more they add to that and kind of harmonize that experience of how people interact with their AWS account and how they get information out of what's right and what's wrong and how do we fix it, I think actually improving that experience will give people a lot more confidence in their actual AWS account is running the way it should be. And they're not going to run into like massive bills down the line or their account getting hacked because someone's leaked their access keys or something like that. So yeah, I think more work on that would be quite good.
Yeah, so we are coming to the end. If you have last couple of words, if you want to mention before we close, please welcome. But what I can say is, as you noticed from our discussion, AWS is a lot, not AWS, but Amazon as group, is a lot customer oriented, like the feedbacks. The feedbacks and your V1 on AWS services will be evaluated by the AWS team. So there are several feedback forms. If you remember last year's Werner's keynote, there was a slide with almost 500 icons behind him. Okay, and what he said was, "Look, this was you. We did it because of you." So he was trying to say is, okay, you asked and we did it. He was admitting also maybe it was a lot, but all your feedbacks are welcome. As also Phil mentioned regarding like skill builder or AWS certification and online content like services, functions, features. So that's what I think everyone should be aware of, I think. And thank you for all of your time, Phil, Dirk, John. It was great to see you again. We were together also as AWS Ambassador community, Ambassador group in Vegas. Hope to catch up also together in the next summit, let's say. And it was great to see you again now. Hopefully we can do an in-person meetup also by time, if we can have a chance to visit London or maybe visit your area by time. So let's see. But thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to bring us together.
Thank you. And have a great night. Have a good evening then. I'm ending the broadcast. Bye.
Happy festivities.
Thanks, everyone.